The curse of being early. Why the world isn't ready yet. There's a strange kind of loneliness that no one talks about. It's not the loneliness of being alone, or being misunderstood, or even being ignored. It's the loneliness of being early. Too early. Of seeing something before others can. Of knowing something before it becomes obvious. Of feeling something the world hasn't caught up to. And at first, this feels like a gift, like you've been chosen. Like you've been given a vision no one else has. But then, almost inevitably, that gift turns into a curse. Because being early means being alone with the truth. And the world, more often than not, isn't ready for it. Let's start with something basic but brutal. Most people don't want to see what's coming. They want to feel safe in what's familiar. They want answers that already fit into the boxes they've built. So when you show up with an idea or a warning or a question that rattles their foundation, they don't reward you. They resist you. They call you naive, delusional, arrogant. They laugh. Or worse, they stay silent. And that silence is the loudest kind of rejection. It's not just that they don't agree, it's that they don't even see you. Think about the people in history who were early. Galileo, Cassandra, Van Gogh, Alan Turing, Nikola Tesla. These weren't just outliers, they were ahead. They lived in the future, but their bodies were trapped in the present. And the world didn't celebrate them while they were alive. It punished them, mocked them, banished them. Because that's what the world does to those who arrive too soon. It confuses clarity for madness. It mistakes foresight for arrogance. And it protects itself by rejecting what it doesn't yet understand. And maybe you felt this too. Maybe you've had moments where you saw a direction no one else noticed, or you felt a shift in culture before it had a name. Maybe you spoke up, tried to share it, only to be met with blank stares or forced smiles. Maybe you learned slowly, painfully, that being early isn't about being first. It's about being invisible until the world catches up, if it ever does. But here's the deeper truth, that invisibility isn't a flaw in the system. It is the system. Because the world doesn't run on truth, it runs on consensus. And consensus is slow. It has to be. It needs time to process, to normalize, to feel safe. So when someone comes along with something that's real but raw, the system rejects it not because it isn't true, but because it isn't familiar. And that's the curse. You can be right, and it still won't matter. Not yet. That's where the philosophical weight of this begins to settle in. Because what do you do when you know something is real, but the world tells you it isn't? How do you hold on to that truth without it breaking you? How do you carry insight that no one wants and still remain sane? These are not questions for the faint of heart. They're the questions that define visionaries, artists, inventors, prophets. And they come with no guarantees of glory. Often, they come only with isolation.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But what if that isolation is the crucible? What if being early isn't a punishment but a preparation? What if it's not about being accepted but about being forged into someone who doesn't need acceptance to act? Because here's the thing, the world may not be ready, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means your timeline doesn't match theirs. And that mismatch, that gap is where all the magic and all the misery live. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were living in a version of reality no one else could see? Like you were watching a story unfold that others were still denying? That feeling isn't insanity. It's awareness. And awareness, when it's unmatched by environment, creates dissonance. That dissonance can either destroy you or refine you. And the difference lies in whether you trust what you know even when no one else does. Because at some point you have to decide, is your truth only valid if others believe it? Or does it have value simply because you see it? That's the existential fork in the road. That's where early thinkers, early feelers, early builders have to choose whether to wait for the world or to keep moving anyway. So maybe the curse of being early isn't that the world isn't ready. Maybe the real curse is that you are ready to build. ready to speak, ready to act. And the world, in its slow inertia, asks you to wait. But what if you didn't? What if you stopped asking for permission? What if you let the silence be proof not that you're wrong, but that you're just early? Because someone has to go first. Someone has to walk into the unknown while everyone else clings to the familiar. And that someone always pays a price. But they also leave a path, a signal, a possibility. And maybe that's enough. The silence of genius. Why recognition always lags behind revelation. There's a moment in every creator's life where the silence becomes deafening. Not the silence of nature or peace, but the silence that follows a work you've poured your soul into. You create something raw, honest, maybe even revolutionary. You hit publish. You speak it into the world. And then, nothing. No applause, no feedback, no acknowledgement. The people you thought would understand don't. The ones you hoped would support you vanish. And suddenly, you're left in a void, wondering if what you made was real at all. That silence is not just frustrating, it's existential, because it forces you to ask, did I really see what I saw, or did I imagine it? This is the silence of genius. And not in the arrogant, narcissistic way we've come to misuse the word. I'm not talking about inflated egos or self-delusion. I'm talking about the kind of genius that sees patterns before they're patterns. That connects dots others haven't noticed yet. That hears the music before the melody becomes popular. It's the kind of inner knowing that feels so clear, so obvious, that it becomes disorienting when others don't see it. But here's the philosophical paradox. Revelation always precedes recognition. Always. And the gap between the two is where most people give up. Think about it. Every major shift in human thought, every breakthrough in science, art, philosophy, or culture began in obscurity. Einstein's theories were dismissed. Emily Dickinson was barely published. Van Gogh sold one painting in his entire life. Nietzsche died alone, believing he'd failed. The world didn't reject them because they were wrong. It rejected them because it was still catching up. This is the pattern. The bolder the truth, the longer the delay. And that delay is where genius either dies or becomes immortal. So what do you do in that delay? When you've spoken something true, but no one hears it. When your masterpiece gets 5 views. When your insight is met with indifference. That's where the real test begins, not of your talent, but of your conviction. Can you keep believing in something no one else can see yet? Can you keep creating not for applause, but for the integrity of the vision itself? Because here's the brutal truth. Genius isn't just having the idea. It's surviving the silence that follows. It's showing up anyway. Not because you're convinced you'll be famous or celebrated, but because the work itself is sacred. Because the insight demands expression, regardless of outcome. That kind of commitment is rare. It requires a detachment from recognition and a devotion to inner truth. Let me ask you something. Would you still do the work if no one ever noticed? Would you still write the book, build the business, record the podcast, paint the canvas if it never went viral, never got picked up, never earned praise? That's not just a question of discipline. That's a question of identity. Are you the kind of person who needs permission to believe in your own vision? Or are you the kind of person who leads, even when no one follows? Because the silence isn't a verdict, it's an echo. It's the space between the first voice and the first response. And in that space, your endurance is being shaped. Your clarity is being refined. Your purpose is being tested. If you can survive that silence without losing faith, you become dangerous not to others, but to the systems that rely on conformity and validation to control creativity. The irony is, by the time the world does catch up, you'll have outgrown the need for it. Recognition that once felt essential becomes irrelevant. Because you won't be chasing approval anymore, you'll be chasing truth. And that's when genius becomes unstoppable. Not because it's finally being seen, but because it no longer needs to be. So if you're in that place, if you've created something meaningful, and the world is still quiet, don't interpret the silence as failure. Interpret it as a sign that you're ahead, a sign that you're too early, And maybe that's exactly where you're supposed to be. The weight of the future. How visionaries bear the burden of tomorrow. There's a strange heaviness that follows insight. Not the burden of confusion, but the burden of clarity. When you see the future, its shape, its direction, its inevitable unfolding, it doesn't feel like power. It feels like pressure. It feels like carrying something fragile and immense across a bridge no one else believes exists. And the bridge isn't built yet. You're building it as you walk. That's the paradox of being a visionary. You're not just imagining a better future. You're carrying its weight, long before anyone else is even aware it's coming. This is something few people understand, because from the outside, vision looks like inspiration. But from the inside, it feels like responsibility. You don't just want to create something new, you have to. You don't just dream of change, you ache with it. You feel the urgency before the world feels the need. You see the cracks in the system before the collapse begins. And the deeper your vision, the more isolated you become. Not because you want to be alone, but because the language of tomorrow is unintelligible to those still fluent in yesterday. And here's the cruel irony. The more accurate your vision is, the more resistance you face. People don't reject you because you're wrong. They reject you because your truth threatens their comfort. Your clarity becomes a mirror they don't want to look into. So they call you extreme, unrealistic, dramatic. They tell you to be patient, to be practical, to wait until the time is right. But that advice is a trap, because the future doesn't wait for permission, and neither can you. Let's be honest, there's a cost to seeing what others don't. You carry the emotional labor of explaining, justifying, defending. You carry the frustration of being misunderstood, not just once, but repeatedly. You carry the exhaustion of trying to translate the future into a language the present can understand. And all the while, you're still building, still dreaming, still holding the line between what is and what could be. That's not just hard work, that's spiritual endurance. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt the weight of an idea so powerful it scared you? Not because you doubted it, but because you knew it was true and you also knew the world wasn't ready for it. That's the moment where vision becomes burden. And how you respond to that burden defines the kind of creator, leader, or thinker you'll become. Will you water it down to make it more palatable? Will you delay it until the world catches up? Or will you carry it anyway, quietly, defiantly, relentlessly? The reason most people don't become visionaries isn't because they lack ideas. It's because they can't handle the weight that comes with seeing first. Because seeing first means feeling first. It means grieving a future no one else knows we're losing. It means hoping for a world that doesn't exist yet, and being crushed by the gap between what is and what should be. That emotional labor, that invisible toll, is what breaks most people before they even begin. And yet, if you're built for it, if you can survive the solitude, the skepticism, the silence, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop needing validation. You stop waiting for signs. You start trusting the vision even when it's heavy, especially when it's heavy, because you realize the weight isn't a problem, it's a signal. It means you're carrying something that matters. So what if the weight you feel isn't a sign to stop, but a sign to start now? What if the heaviness is a clue that you're standing on the edge of something real, something necessary, something only you can bring into existence? Because the future doesn't arrive fully formed. It arrives in fragments, in whispers, in visions that only a few can see and even fewer are willing to carry. Maybe you're one of those few. Maybe the weight you feel isn't crushing you. Maybe it's shaping you. The final betrayal. Why the world only believes when it no longer matters. There is no betrayal more devastating than the one that comes after the silence, after the years of being ignored, doubted, dismissed. It's the moment when the world finally turns around and says, "You were right," but they say it too late. They say it after you've already moved on, after the damage has already been done, after the window for real change has already closed. And that's the final betrayal of being early. The moment they finally listen is the moment it no longer matters. You spend years, sometimes decades, trying to warn, to wake people up, to show them what's coming. You pour your truth into your work, your words, your actions. You endure the silence. You survive the wait. And just when you've come to accept that no one will ever understand, the world suddenly shifts. The things you said years ago are now common sense. The ideas you were mocked for are now mainstream. The vision you were punished for is now policy. But they don't remember your warnings. They don't remember your name. They don't ask where the idea came from. They just adopt it like it was always theirs, like you never existed. And you're left with a strange mixture of emotion. Relief maybe that the truth finally broke through, but also grief. Grief for all the time that was lost, for the people who didn't make it, for the damage that could have been prevented, for the opportunities that were wasted because the world wasn't ready when you were. It's a bitter kind of vindication, and it raises a brutally honest question. What's the point of being right if being right doesn't change anything in time? This is the part no one tells you about. They romanticize the visionary, the genius, the pioneer, but they skip the part where recognition arrives long after it's useful. They don't talk about how the world only starts to believe when it's no longer brave to do so, when the risk is gone, when the price has already been paid by someone else. That's how society works. It resists new truths until they're safe enough to commodify, until they can be used without discomfort, until they're empty enough to be palatable. And yet, you keep going. Why? Because you weren't doing it for them. Not really. Not in the end. You were doing it because the truth demanded a voice, because the vision wouldn't let you rest, because even if no one listened, you couldn't stay silent. That's the strange and powerful freedom of being early. You stop needing the reward. You start creating not from a place of validation, but from a place of conviction. And that's when your work becomes timeless. Not because the world finally catches up, but because you stopped waiting for it to. Let me ask you, would you still speak the truth if you knew no one would remember your name? Would you still build the future if you knew history would erase your fingerprints? That's the final test. That's the measure of whether you are truly called or just chasing legacy. Because legacy is a fragile thing. It can be rewritten, stolen, forgotten. But impact lives in the ripple, not the credit, in the change, not the applause. So maybe the final betrayal isn't betrayal at all. Maybe it's just a reminder that the work was never about being seen. It was about seeing and having the courage to act on what you saw, even if no one followed, even if no one believed, even if the world only figured it out when it was already too late. Because someone has to be the first. Someone has to walk alone. Someone has to plant seeds in soil they'll never see bloom. And if that someone is you, if you've carried that curse of being early, then maybe you're not cursed at all. Maybe you're exactly who the world needed, just too soon.